Welcome to this talk, and happy to see so many of you this early Saturday morning. Today we're going to be talking about what comes after the circular economy, and this makes sense after 3 days of looking at circular business models in furniture. We're already ready to move on to the next thing, or maybe the right thing. I am happy to introduce Laura Storm, regenerative business leadership thinker, author, and co-founder of regenerators.co. We also have Ditte Lysgaard, managing partner at Linear Group, and Jesper Pandu, CEO of Skagerak. Welcome. And we will start this because I think regenerative business and thinking may be a new concept. So we will start an introduction by Laura to teach us all what is it about.
Yes, thank you so much, Johan. And I just want to add that I too really appreciate so many of you showing up on a sacred Saturday morning to hear about moving beyond circularity and into the regenerative era. So what is regenerative business? I just need to make sure I can see everything. So, and why do we need a regenerative approach? And why do we need to move beyond circularity? So just some stats that many of you probably know. I don't know, this doesn't really work. Maybe if I hang out here. Okay. These are stats that many of you already know. We are in the midst of a 6th mass extinction. We have runaway climate change. We soon have more plastic in our oceans than marine life. It's not really going in a great direction. Since the 1950s, we have been through what scientists is referring to as the Great Acceleration. So everything from population to paper consumption, CO2, has just been on the same trajectory. But what is often or always missing from this picture is the fact that our mental health and well-being has been on the same trajectory. And the thing is, when people are incredibly stressed out, which 98% of executives on a global level is on a regular level, they're not able to think outside the box. They're not able to think holistically. They're not able to be creative and innovative, which is what we need now more than ever to ensure that the circular economy will actually succeed. So what we see is an interconnectedness of our global challenges. And I think it's rarely being looked upon this way, that we do need to think about this issue as an interconnected challenge. And it does actually matter how we feel, and it does actually matter that we also think about this issue in a more holistic manner. So I welcome and celebrate the circular economy, but we need more than that, and we need to move beyond rigid mechanistic thinking. And I'm not saying that the circular economy is influenced by rigid mechanistic thinking, but that could be what could happen in the future if we are not at the same time trained to think holistically and in an interconnected way. And as I said, when we are incredibly stressed out, we are not able to tap into our creative ingenuity. We are not able to be compassionate. We are not able to think holistically. And that is what we need now more than ever. Unfortunately, many of us has been trained to think in very linear ways. So for many, this step into circularity has been a huge step. But we need to dare look outside the window, see the interconnectedness of life, see the fact that we are part of a greater interconnected web of life. And that's what the regenerative economy or the regenerative approach is all about. The regenerative approach is offering a way where we are not doing what we have done a lot in the past. Every time we find something that can be a solution, it can be a technology to transfer or a new political agreement or new financial mechanisms, we fall in love with those and we don't see the interconnectedness of our challenges. And we apply this very rigid mechanistic approach to problem solving. We need to dare think out the box, and we need to be conscious of the fact that we cannot we simply do not have the time to continuously apply the same kind of thinking to our challenges that created our problems in the first place. So we do need this holistic and regenerative approach to our current challenges if we want to tackle them in due time. And as you who are here probably already know, we have very little time. We have the next decade. So we need to do this properly. Thankfully, more and more businesses, especially on a global level, I don't think we are that far yet in Denmark, so I really welcome the courage to put this on the agenda today, because we need this discussion in Denmark as well. On a global level, more and more businesses are getting their head around that, because they do know that they need to ensure that they have inbuilt resiliency into their organizational design if they want to be here in the long run. And that is what a regenerative approach offers. So regenerative means to restore, to replenish, revitalize, to heal. And that has to be the essence of the approach that we apply both to our inner ecosystems and our outer ecosystems. So this can look like a bit of a complex slide, but this is really the trajectory that we need to be on. And we can see circularity as one component to a regenerative economy, but it's not everything. We do need this interconnected approach, and we do need the organizations and companies that are already here. The reason that they're here is that they're mimicking everything they do in alignment with the principles of life. So that is really what characterizes these pioneers, that they are learning from the wisdom and intelligence of nature. The regenerative business DNA is an approach that offers a holistic angle or lens to organizational development, and also the development of communities and societies, where we focus equally on a circular economy and biomimicry-inspired design, but we also focus on how do we create a thriving culture. How do we create a culture where people are actually thriving? Because we know that when people are thriving, it's a lot easier to invent new great ideas and to create the conditions for life to flourish, which is the ethos of the regenerative movement. So these regenerative pioneers, what they do is that they lend wisdom from the intelligence of life, from the wisdom of nature. And they see that as their design guide for everything that they do. And they are lending the wisdom of life's 3.8 billion years of R&D. And we can narrow down this logic into 7 key principles. And I would like to just offer some examples of those. So the first principle is that everything we do has to be life-affirming. And really we could stop there, but it means that everything we do has to create the conditions for more life to flourish. So when an apple falls to the ground, it's not waste, it's actually delicious nutrients for the topsoil to get even better and for microbes to feed on, etc. And inside is the seed for the next batch of innovation. And that is also what cradle to cradle and circular economy is lending from. That is the whole model of a circular economy. But as I said, a circular economy is just one component of a regenerative economy. It's that understanding that everything we do has to move away from this approach to life, a monocultural approach to life, where we inject fertilizer to do our best to increase our yield. Instead, we need a life regenerating approach, where we actually work with the ecosystems we are surrounded by, and where we do our best to be stewards of life and to ensure that we have the greatest inbuilt resiliency into our living systems. And it's the same for our organizational cultures. This has very much been the norm, to put people into cubicles under artificial lighting and just assume that they will do their best sitting there for 9 hours a day. We need to create cultures where people are allowed to actually thrive and tap into their human ingenuity and into their health and vitality. The second principle is that life is constantly changing, and superorganisms in nature, for example, is constantly responding to the changes around them. So they have not evolved thanks to a very rigid control-obsessed hierarchy, and they have not evolved thanks to how Darwin is interpreted. Many see Darwin as having been the great thinker who said survival of the fittest. He never actually said that. He said survival of the species best able to fit in thanks to really strong relationships. So what can we learn, for example, from superorganisms? So a flock of bees or birds or ants, they are super responsive. So they communicate via very clear feedback loops and are able to quickly assess an opportunity or a threat or a challenge and dictate what needs to happen in that situation. They don't waste time planning a meeting and having a new decision or a new idea go through a rigid bureaucratic hierarchy. So we need to move away from this control and predict rigid, in many ways fear-infused, control-obsessed hierarchies, and move into a way of viewing life where we see everything around us as great cells that are part of a greater superorganism. And our organizations are, in fact, living systems. So how can we be stewards of life and ensure the greatest health and vitality in that living system? The third principle is that everything in life is relational and interconnected. Nu skifter den, ikke? Boop. Hvordan kan jeg komme tilbage? Står de og tænker, sådan der. I går glip af lidt, det må I tage med. Men this model is from the Austrian physicist Fritjof Capra, and he says it quite beautifully, because to the left-hand side you have an image of death, and to the right-hand side you have an image of life. So the quality of your living system really boils down to the quality of the interconnected relationships. And as leaders of the regenerative era, we really have a lens for how can we ensure that there is as high a quality of our interconnected relationships as possible. Because life is not just individual parts that are floating around together. They are part of a greater interconnected whole. And imagine, for example, in an ecosystem like the body, if the KPIs of the heart continuously undermine those of the lungs, or if our kidneys cross the spleen because we saw it as competition. So it's really that understanding that we are part of a whole, and we need to move away from this toxic dog-eat-dog, fierce competitive approach to life, and instead see each other as partners. And I know that these two great thought leaders over there very much think along those lines, that we need to tap into the greater ecosystem that we are part of and see how we can empower more around us, because they are part of our ecosystem as well. We need this whole system perspective, because you are only as strong as the weakest link in your ecosystem, and that's really what characterizes many of the great regenerative leaders that we see today. So, for example, a company like Houdini, a Swedish apparel brand, they are on a journey towards being fully regenerative. And circular economy is a fundamental part of their strategy. But they also work a lot with their greater interconnected ecosystem. How can we ensure that we empower all of our suppliers? How can we make sure that every time we have invented something new and something genius, we make it open source so we can get the input from the collective intelligence. So we are not with great fear hiding our great ideas because we're afraid someone else will steal it. No, we are opening up because we know we need to advance quickly together. Interface is another great company that really has that understanding of being an ecosystem facilitator. So, for example, they are paying Philippine fishermen to fish up discarded plastic net from the oceans, paying them a fair fee, using that plastic into their carpet tiles. And then the carpet tiles is sold as part of a service agreement where every time a company has stained one of the carpet tiles, they can get it back. So it's part of the service economy. Diversity is another great important or a great principle in the logic of life. We need diversity for our ecosystems to thrive, and we need to stop shying away from, for example, hiring people that are different than we are because it feels more comfortable to work with people that reminds us of ourselves. We need to fully explore what it means to have a diversity celebratory mindset, where we are not just kind of seeing gender or age or race, but we are truly embarking on a journey where we are daring to value people that are different than we are. I could talk for a long time about that. We don't have the time today. The last principle I wanted to bring with me today is the importance of seeing life as part of a cyclical process. We are cyclical beings on a cyclical planet, and what we see in regenerative leaders and many of the organizations that I work with, they have stopped celebrating the constant focus on the spring and summer, the constant focus on the launch, the next great idea, that kind of obsession around being in full-on work mode all the time. That is against human nature. So what they're doing is they're celebrating the introverted nature and the regenerative powers of the autumn and the winter. So they have integrated into their work processes time for integration and reflection. Doesn't mean they send their employees on a 3-month vacation, but it does mean that they're integrating and valuing the integration period and the stillness and the time for reflection. And they know that that's how they make their employees thrive and regenerate quicker. So we need that approach where we are including everything into our work process. The intensity of spring and summer and the preparation of harvest in the early autumn, and then we go into retreat into our regenerative caves. So the key question to ask is, how can we align our ways with the law of life, with the logic of life? How can we make sure that the circular economy doesn't just look at production, but also values, for example, I think it was this week or last week, Ellen MacArthur launched a big report around the importance of integrating biodiversity into a circular economy mindset. That's the kind of focus that we need to have. We need a focus on the interconnectedness of life and seeing the circular economy as an important component of that, but we also need to dare open the windows and look at the interconnectedness of life and how can we be fully regenerative in everything that we do. For anyone that is interested, I've co-authored this really great book that I recommend you all to read if any of what I said intrigued you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I hope you all now have a better understanding what we mean when we talk regenerative. But as Laura said, we also have 2 other thought leaders here, and I would like to give you each 3 minutes to introduce yourself and how you work with this mindset or practice of regeneration. And Jesper, would you like to start?
Okay. Thank you for letting me come here today. It's great to be back at the museum and just have a sneak peek of how it would look next year as well. My name is Jesper. I'm one of the lucky owners of Skagerrak. Skagerrak is a design company. We founded in the 70s, so we're quite old in a way, but I'm still older. And what we would like to do, or what we try to do every day, is to inspire the current consumers to be users of the future. Meaning that you don't buy and throw out, you buy and keep. And if you don't like it anymore, don't need it anymore, you can actually pass it on. And sitting here and listening to Laura, I didn't know that what we do is actually called regenerative business. To me, it was just common sense to act in that way. And we made a lot of changes, especially in the organization, how we look at how we work with each other, how we reach out to others. And I think what it all centers about for us is to be a collective.
Thank you. And Ditte?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me as well. I guess you can say that I'm kind of a theorist who luckily ended up in a very practical world of linear, where we are founded by Anders, who's an architect, so design is at the core. And we do architectural projects, but we also do turn waste resources into new materials, so a lot of recycling. And that means that within Linear we have a really, really strong community of like-minded change makers who are really, really good, and it's a pleasure to always see, really, really good at supporting each other and really making each other thrive. But we also have an everyday life of having to interact with a very conservative sector, being on the building sites, having that where it's, there's truly a tradition of, the higher your sound, the sound of your voices, the more right you are in that sense of there's a lot of arguing and stuff like that. So that's just to say that we really try to work a lot with how to do things in a regenerative way, but it's also a very big challenge of how to go about it, especially at the same time when, there's also the people you want, to give you contracts so that you can do even more, and then you can make sure that you have, the liquidity to pay your employees and all of these different things. So just in that we really want to do it, but I also see that sometimes we still struggle with how to actually do it in a practical sense, and that's why I think it's very important to have a conversation like this, but also why I think, what you said about, circular economy being one part of the regenerative society and the regenerative economy, which I think that there's an opportunity for all of us to be much better at seeing the ecosystem of this sort of journey towards sustainability. So I do something, hopefully that's a good thing, yes, but does another. But just because it isn't the same doesn't mean that they both have value. And I think that there's, within this room and in general, within all of us who are trying to do the best we can, how can we, be even more regenerative in the sense that we enable each other to do more and support each other to do more, rather than necessarily saying, this is the right answer or this is the right answer, because, hopefully it will, there will not be one silver bullet, so we all really need to work with all of the different things.
Thank you, and very interesting. And I would like to start by talking about, yes, but you didn't know it was regenerative, but it's a mindset you have, and you both as companies have a very different, perhaps futuristic mindset than maybe your customers or your collaborators. I would like to know if you have examples of how this comes into play or how this shows up in everyday interactions, because as you said, Ditte, we can all try and influence others, but maybe it's just in the way that we operate as humans and as businesses that actually, has it created any kind of push or conflicts or just interesting situations in your work?
Yeah, I think that happens every day. Sometimes it doesn't go the way we want, other times luckily it does. So two positive examples. We built a building out in Ørestaden called Upcycle Studios. And the way we are a producer of building materials, but as Laura was talking about, it's all connected. So we never actually produce the materials ourselves. We tap into existing value chain. One, because they're much better at
balance in waste streams, because we are aware that at one point it should be hopefully be able to be recycled at a higher value or simply be reused so we don't have the waste in the first place. But so there we produced with a more traditional manufacturer of windows, and they said, yes, we'll happily to help you, but we will not take your waste windows inside our factories. Thank you, but no thank you. That's just, it's fun what you do, but don't take it anywhere our operations, right? And so we did that project. We actually have to collect the windows
on the building site. But then following that collaboration, they saw that it was possible to do and that it made sense, and everything could be accounted for. And now we have a more sort of traditional setup where we take the windows to have stored at their factory, and then they actually do it in-house because they saw that it wasn't as dangerous as it may appear at the first time. And then another example I loved coming at the exhibition here, we created a material out of this recycled plastic, and so no one wanted it when we were first asked. It was only being incinerated because no one could see the business of it. But now here there are like 3 other designers that are now designing with our material, which is really nice to see that by doing something we can inspire others to do it from a very tangible sense.
But I think if I could just add, one of the things that I often mention as an example in my talks is how you have also empowered new kind of businesses has been able to sprung up in as part of your greater ecosystem, the demolition crews, etc. is part of also a regenerative approach in terms of how can we revitalize parts of our country as well by empowering not just people living in the city but all around and empower them to see their role in the circular transition.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that. We need to be mindful of how do we help people in that. Is selective demolition for demolishers, is it something that's super annoying, difficult to do and you don't know how to do? Or is it actually something that for the first time in a very long time empowers the demolishers to not only compete on price, but actually be able to reutilize their skill sets of actually having a proudness of their profession and what they do, which the circular economy can also be for them. But
exactly.
For sure. And this is part of the community aspect of regeneration that I'd love to come back to. But I'll give you, Jesper, a chance to answer the original question. Have you had anyone standing on the outside and couldn't see the fun in the way you were doing things, as Dieter said?
I don't like conflicts. And we think from inside and out. So we have been working with our team from the beginning and say this is what we believe in. We have few values that we like to work from. Being decent, take responsibility. And it's not just being responsible, it's actually to take the responsibility. And when you do that, you're active. You make active choices. And we have had customers where we 10 years ago couldn't afford not to do business with them. But the relationship that we had with them was not healthy. And then for a long time I said, well, one day we can say we don't do business. So I was waiting and waiting until we actually could afford it. But then I realized I can wait forever. So 1 year we just did it, and we had the biggest customer, almost 10% of our business. And we said, well, from tomorrow we don't do any business together anymore. And we could try to do a business case on it, but I don't like business cases either. So no conflicts and no business cases. And so we just did it. And it set so much free, especially in our heart and mind and soul, that we didn't have to work with people where we didn't share the same values. And it's not today that we can see that we have the same values as all of our customers. It's not. But the first thing we talk about when we meet clients is how we see the world. And then after that, we can talk products. So it's a way for us to avoid the conflicts. I'd rather spend our time working with our the workshops that we're working with and trying to inspire them to do more, to do better, to do changes. So.
But as you acknowledged, you had to wait to be in a position, and that's a sort of privilege. Do you wish that you
sorry,
could do it?
then I said it wrong. Sorry,
Yeah?
because I thought I had to wait
Okay.
until we could afford it, and then I realized you can't wait because you will wait forever. So 1 year we just did it. I said, okay, we might lose money this year. There's nothing to do about it. But I'd like to have some cash money in the pocket if something happens. It's nice to be, okay, we can survive. So I wanted to wait, but then I realized I can wait forever because it doesn't make any change if you're constantly. It will hold you back. So we just said we have to do it now.
So do you think businesses can start off being selective about who they work with and still be profitable?
Definitely. You should do it. That's my learning. If somebody's asking me, I said, well, just do it. If it feels right to you, it is right. And then don't think so much about profit. Profit is, it's short-term thinking. You need to look in the long run. I acknowledge that you need cash flow to pay salaries and all. I acknowledge that. But then you might have to move in a bit slow instead of going fast. Then go a bit slower. Then you can do it.
Sure.
Business is not about something from 1 year to the next. For me, it's over and over and over and for many, many years.
And Dieter, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. You're also a big company, visionary. Did you think you had the same luxury to be so visionary within a smaller company? Or is it for the privileged big ones?
I mean, well, first, we're not that big, quite frankly, and we've never. So I think it's definitely an opportunity for both small and big, and both have opportunity and obstacles within their size. But just coming on this sort of, if you can start a business based on only wanting to work with the right clients, I think we're not where we need to go in terms of demand for new types of solutions, but definitely that's a very viable and very sort of, in almost a traditional sense, smart business today, because there are so many that are starting to really want change but have no idea how to do it. So if you are a solution provider, then there's a great opportunity, and then it makes sense that you're not working with companies that aren't aligned on that. And our experience is, because again we are 35 people, it's not that big, but we do seem bigger in a lot of ways because we have this agenda, which means that there's a lot more exposure, but also from a client perspective that we're now allowed to work for the pension funds and much larger clients that we would normally at that size be. So for us, it's definitely also the smartest business choice, essentially.
For sure. And Laura, how do you see this? You see so many regenerative businesses. Is this a transition model, or can you start out with regenerative practices?
You mean if you can start out with the
mindset and then make money, or do you have to make money and then become regenerative?
No, we see many pop-ups that are, and we train many startups to think regeneratively from the beginning, because it just makes more sense once you start to dive into the regenerative principles, to have that inbuilt resiliency into your organizational model and into the design of your products from the beginning. Just makes good business sense, instead of wasting time on the transaction cost a few years later down the road. It's also, I mean, how you can activate your employees and activate their potential based on that strong mission is also something that we see, and I think both companies here is representing that. You can tap into human ingenuity in far greater ways if you have a very strong ambition and mission in life. So I would definitely recommend to just do it from the beginning if you're considering starting a regenerative business.
For sure. Or transitioning.
Yes.
I would love to go back to the interconnectedness and the community aspect, because I know you both as businesses work within the communities. And yes, but I would like for you to talk. When we talked prior, you had some good examples of how you give back to the communities around you, both locally and globally.
Yes. We talked, and I didn't write down what we talked about. My back hurts a bit, so I have to stand up sometimes. Sorry. we don't have a vision or a mission because I can't tell the difference. So we have a philosophy, and we say we are in business to give more than we take. And we are clear on the point that we are in business. If we are a strong business, we can make a lot of positive impact. And if you're not that strong, there's a risk that you might make some choices that are not actually good for the planet or the people. So we started out by saying to each other, we are B Corp. And when we joined B Corp in 2017, we said to each other, well, from now on, everybody at the Skagerrak team, we can work 3 days a year for a charity. The only charity you can't work for is a Roskilde Festival. But apart from that, you can go anywhere. And it turned out it was really difficult for the team to get around it, because it was like, oh, I get 3 days. I need to save the world. So I talked a bit about it, but actually in the conversations that we had, it was better, because we found out we need to change it. We had to say to each other, we have 25 hours, and then you can use them as you like. Some are helping at the elderly home when they have the flu vaccination. Somebody did a cooking school for kids. So we try to do something locally. And then one of my long-time dreams 2 weeks ago came true. We have, together with Hedeselskabet, bought some farming land up north in Jutland, 40 hectares. So it used to be farming, and we want to plant trees. And I know your delivery time for trees is quite long. It's like 50 years, 100 years maybe. But it's like if you don't do anything, nothing will happen. So next year in May we are planting 90,000 trees. So that's a different way. That costs more money. The other just costs time. And when we work with workshops in Indonesia and Vietnam. We do outdoor furniture in teak, and teak is really good quality in that area, so we produce there. And we try to inspire the workshops to do more. It could be on electricity, it could be with the conditions for the people in the workshop. And it also takes patience. And you also have to acknowledge that it's kind of a journey, that if we come and say we want you to change everything tomorrow, they'd rather back out. It's not the culture. So we try constantly to talk about it.
And when you say workshops, you mean the places where they build your furniture?
The factories.
Yes.
Yeah, where we produce.
Yes.
So I think that it has, it has different sizes, but it's all about impact.
For sure.
And when we talk impact, something can be the footprint. It can be your emissions. Easy to measure, maybe not so easy to work with, but you can actually do something. And so for me, it's about reducing the negative footprint. That's one thing, but I think more important is maximizing the positive contribution, which is far more difficult to measure. You have to feel it.
For sure.
And so I think when you talk regenerative, it's layer on layer on layer. We don't have an individual bonus, we have collective bonus. We don't have any KPIs, we feel it. So I think when you add it all up together, you'll see the big picture as the one we had, where it was all interconnected. And when I saw that, I understood. So I think it's... It
wasn't a business plan, so you got it.
No, it wasn't. Sorry. Somebody asked me the other day, oh, can you come and tell us about your business plan? I was like, we have a dream. But maybe I have to write it down one day.
Nice. And Ditte, as you said, you're actually not that big, but that means that you must be very interconnected with everyone around you. How does Lena work with contributing to the local societies where you operate?
So I think for us, there's many answers to that question, because there's something in our production partnerships and the work we do in that regard. But of course also because we have an architectural practice, there's just very much also in that potential opportunity to create more interconnectedness, particularly we work particularly within cities, but to do that and make sure that that is a focal part of what we do, rather it be shared spaces and making sure that there's that the demographics of the place and everything is in order, rather it be we do a new project in Aarhus where we're trying to convince the municipality to let us essentially adopt the trees that are being taken down elsewhere, because it's a shame that they're just being discarded when we know how long it takes for a tree to grow. We've mainly been working within local communities, but one project that's been really, really nice for us to do this year that has also brought a lot of energy and joy to the team at home is everything we learned within plastic recycling. We created a partnership with CARE, Denmark and Norway, and Danita, and then bought some very cheap, essentially, equipment of open source that is Precious Plastics, a company that does, and then brought equipment there, and then helped them essentially be able to recycle all of the plastic waste that they have within the camp, so that they can create roofings for themselves, because that's a huge problem for them, for many reasons that I won't get into now, but it's crazy. But it also meant that we could then, we did the Danish pavilion in Milan, and the roofing there was actually something that we bought from the producers in the camp. So also just bridging between we might do something where it's not business, but then by including it in business for them, I mean, that was a very big value creator in terms of them learning new skills, but also the proudness of having contributed to that.
Providing equitable work.
Yeah, and that they actually saw that, it wasn't just about helping them. We were actually able to have, it gave us value in the pavilion. The pavilion needed roofing, and
For sure. I would love to end on the thought that you had in the end, Laura, with the cyclical thinking. You said that we're so stuck in the summer of things, and the summer is the production, the blooming. But a cyclical mindset in a company does not necessarily mean 3 months of winter break. But what does it look like in a company to have, so we're zooming in now on the very, very local community that is your employees. What does that cyclical working look like?
Many of the organizations that I have worked with have done it in a way where they are talking about the 4 seasons in a year, and the importance for us to ensure that every day has all 4 seasons integrated. And the leaders have often kind of stepped forward and shown what it could look like. And it can look as simple as, let's start every meeting. For example, let's cut the meetings to half an hour. This insanity of believing that every meeting has to take an hour, but that's a side track. Start the meeting with a minute of silence, making sure that everyone there is practiced in what we call deep listening. So it's not just the loud alpha voices that gets to be heard, but that everyone is listened to equally. And then 3/4 into the meeting, you stop and take another minute of silence. And you just see what kind of magic that does to the room. And in all the organizations that I have worked with, it means that employees feels more energized when they leave a meeting than they normally did. Normally they would feel exhausted and drained after leaving a meeting, because it can be so loud and it can be so full of positioning and lack listening. And if we really want to co-evolve and co-create to create beautiful emergence of new innovations, we need to be able to tap into that listening and that true co-created vibe, where a regenerative approach to that can really, really create the conditions for that. So that's just one simple life hack.
Lovely. And I'd love to hear both from either one of you. What does this mean for you guys in everyday life, in the office, giving back more than you take, or rebuilding, or the circular way? What does it look like every day for the people working?
It's a difficult question to answer. I think we are very, very blessed in that literally every employee there has a deep care for each other and for the world. And so, regardless of if you're an architect or you're the financial assistant, there's whenever we do something, whether it's the study trip or whatnot, there's just a very big care for each other. But that also means that there is constantly new ideas coming up in terms of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. So I think we're quite blessed right now. It's my best answer in that it flows very natural of an abundance of ideas coming from wherever, and then it's mainly of allowing that to grow. And if we're not doing it, people will very much call us out of it. There was almost a sort of a riot when our lunch delivery for 2 weeks after COVID couldn't provide an all vegetarian lunch. Nobody really wanted to eat lunch at all, and that's kind of just how we're blessed with people are.
Interesting.
I had one employee coming, and he had been in Corona lockdown. And he showed me, and he came with his notebook and all of the calculations that he'd done, essentially, and spent his lockdown period not on watching Netflix, but on calculating on how we could do our plastic facade elements using the power of the sun only, and then what would the difference be if it was in May versus in August, and in Denmark if we could do it elsewhere, and that's
so
just very
it
nice.
sounds like you also have a lot of passion within Linear.
Yeah.
Yes, but can you answer this very difficult question? What does your philosophy look like every day?
It is difficult because often in teams where you are thinking on how can you change the world, you're also really ambitious, and so sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between working life and off time. So we have tried different approaches. During COVID, we talked meditation. How can we actually use meditation to tell ourselves, now I'm off? And for somebody that was right, and for others it wasn't. And actually we just did it the past 2 days during 3 days of design. In the morning we had meditation sessions at our showroom. It felt good. And so I think, as Dita says, it's when you have a strong team, they also find the ways themselves for that. I think one good thing that we have done was to take out the bonus system, and also we don't have any KPIs. We don't do any, talks on how should you develop for the next year. We have to feel it, and so I think it has taken out some of that can be stress. That I have to achieve this and that, and then I have to learn that. And if it doesn't feel natural to you, I think it's stress instead of actually a blessing. So again, it's the interconnected thing that does it. But right now that we've been through some time here where it's been busy. We have had a lot to do, and so to realize that we need more people on the team could take some time, because you also, how about the economy, how would it look, and COVID and all. So for the past 6 months, it hasn't been as I wish for or hope for, because we have worked too much. And I hope that we can actually go into the harvest idea and the winter idea, and to work a bit less and take a bit more care of ourselves, which is totally the belief that I have. You have to, have a healthy soul.
Interesting, and thank you for sharing, and both of you for sharing that it's a journey, that it's always evolving, and thank you, Laura, for enlightening us with these ideas. Thank you all. I would like, before you all just leave, before you go into the other rooms, explore the exhibition, just take a minute, feel the seat, feel the room. We have good acoustics in here. It's been a lovely, almost an hour of hopefully deep listening I've tried, and deep thoughts. And before you leave into the world, I hope you take this feeling with you. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and for listening. There is an exhibition going out there with 46 brands working with circularity. And I know our speakers will stay for just a few minutes if you have further questions. But that's all, just 2 seconds, feel the chair, and then thank you.